Okay, this is new material for us right now, so you're going to have to take really good notes on this. Again, remember, you can always pause if you need to finish copying something down. When you're telling a story about any event in the past, you will almost always use both the imperfect and the passé composé. So, and I've said this before in class, pretend you're describing a scene from a movie. Anything that's going on in the background, describing the scenery or the setting, and the scenery, you're going to use the imperfect. If you're going to talk about the action, what happened, then you're going to use the passé composé. So let's start by looking at some of these examples here. Okay, first we're going to have le décor, where we're going to use the imparfait. This is the setting and the scenery that we're looking at here. Okay, here we have a café. So here we're talking about time as well. Remember when we're talking about what time it is, then we use the imparfait. Il était midi dans le petit village de Barbizon. Il faisait beau. That's nothing new to us. We know that when we're talking about the weather, we're going to use the imparfait as well. Il n'y avait personne dans les rues. Okay, remember that ne personne means nobody. So, in the streets, there was nobody. And we're going to use that as our scenery, our setting, so we're using the imparfait. Now, we're looking at this cafe, and there are people there. The people are there, and they are having lunch. Ask yourself, is that the action? Is that what's really happening in the movie? Or are those extras? Is that just part of the background? Au café de la Poste, les clients déjeunaient tranquillement. Notice here, even though they're doing this thing, it's part of the scenery, so we're not going to use that as an action. That's part of the background. Now, let's talk about l'action. Okay, this is where we're going to use the passé composé. Also, let's look for key words that will indicate the passé composé. If you remember in our last lesson, we had words like l'été dernier. That was a key word saying last summer, okay, or last year or whatever. Word like that, last whatever. Words like hier. Even words like, let's say a time, a specific time. À 8 heures, at that time something happened. Or maybe dimanche, on Sunday. If you're going to use that in the past tense, that's one specific dimanche. Maybe if you want to say on Sundays in general, but that's not what we're saying here. Okay? So here we have the word soudain. Soudain is a vocabulary word we have to make sure we know. That's one of those good indicators, and it means suddenly. So, une grosse voiture noire est arrivée. That's an action. That's one of the main things that's happening in this little town of Barbizon. This great big black car arrived. Elle s'est arrêtée devant le café de la Poste. Okay, this reflexive verb right here is it stopped itself, right? The car stopped. So elle s'est arrêtée devant le café de la Poste. Now in this picture, we have somebody getting out, and that's the main action. That's what this whole scene, that's what the story is about. Un homme est descendu et est entré dans le café. These are the actions, right? These are what this guy did. Tout le monde l'a regardé. Now, everybody who's here, they were having lunch. Remember, tout le monde, ou les clients déjeunaient, they were having lunch. That's what was going on. But now this guy has stepped out of the car and everyone looked at him. It's this one-time action thing that happened when he stepped out of the car. Et tout le monde a reconnu le grand docteur Gérard Auteuil. So, and everyone recognized the big or the great actor Gérard Auteuil. Incidentally, that's the name. That's two different actor names put together. We have Gérard Depardieu and then Daniel Auteuil, who are both very big actors. Any French person would know who they are. Okay, so do you see the difference between when we're looking back here at what the scene was? This is the time of day it was. This was what the weather was like. It's all scenery in the background. This is who was not there. No one was around. This is at the actual cafe. There were people having lunch. That's how we are kind of painting the background of our movie scene. And then here we have all of these actions that happened. So it is important to be able to understand when we're going to use the imparfait and the passé composé. They're going to be in the same story. Often they're going to be in the same sentence. Here we have the last sentence. Tout le monde a commencé à applaudir. So everyone started, a commencé, in the passé composé, to applaud. Now, let's look at the difference between the imparfait and the passé composé in these sentences. The first set is going to tell us what you were doing. It's part of the scenery, the background, when you heard the explosion. The second set, we're going to see how it tells what you did when you heard the explosion. You could even put in your notes here, as a result. That might help make more sense because you would not have done these things if you did not hear the explosion. So let's look at this. Il y a eu une explosion. There was an explosion. So look at this. Quand vous avez entendu l'explosion, qu'est-ce que vous faisiez? Do you notice how here we have the passé composé? Because when you heard the explosion, that was a specific time. There was a one time where you heard the explosion. You wouldn't say when you were hearing the explosion. Hearing an explosion is a pretty defined, quick thing, we hope. But this part of the sentence says, when it says, qu'est-ce que vous faisiez, what were you doing? What were you in the middle of when the explosion happened? So here, someone might say, je lisais, or je regardais la télévision, je faisais la vaisselle. These are all things that you could have been in the middle of doing when you heard the explosion. Now let's look at the second set. The difference between this first set and the second set is we're going to talk about what you did, maybe as a result of hearing the explosion. So look at the question. Quand vous avez entendu l'explosion. Again, we're going to keep this in the passé composé because it's just a one-time occurrence. But look at the rest of this. Qu'est-ce que vous avez fait? What did you do? This translates into what did you do? This up here translates into what were you doing? Do you see the difference? So let's look at the answers that they give us here. Je me suis levé. Okay, I got up. Je suis allé à la fenêtre. J'ai téléphoné à la police. So these are things that you did because you heard the explosion. Okay, you could actually combine these, and you could say, quand j'ai entendu l'explosion, je lisais et je me suis levé. Right? I was reading and I got up. I went to the window and I called the police. So even within a same sentence, you use both tenses very often. In your notes, I want you to add something new. I want you to look at it this way. When we talk about something that happened in the past, we have a timeline. So think of anything that happens in the past as there being a timeline. Okay, and let's think about this explosion. Okay, right here was it looks more like a flower, doesn't it? This here is our explosion. Okay, here, this part of time right here, we don't really know how long it was going. This is where you were reading, right? Je lisais. Je faisais la vaisselle. Then also, in this one specific time right here was the explosion. So what did you do right here? Je me suis levé. Right here, je suis allé à la fenêtre. Right here, j'ai téléphoné à la police. Okay, and you can use this timeline as a visual to help you decide whether you're going to use the passé composé or the imparfait for a part of your story. Even if you're talking about, when I was 7. Okay, so here you would say, quand j'avais 7 ans. That's this time frame right here, right? You would say maybe I would go to my grandmother's house a lot, right? J'allais souvent, meaning often, chez ma grand-mère. Okay? Now, what about if when you were 7, you did something that resulted maybe in something, like you have a permanent limp or something, let's say. Why? Because quand j'avais 7 ans, when I was 7, I fell, right? So here you would say, je suis tombé. You see how this can be one specific action that took place sometime when you were 7. So this is a good visual. I think this helps us get it a little bit more straight as far as when we're going to use the passé composé versus the imparfait in a story that we're telling in the past. So let's have a little bit of practice with this. We might even go ahead and do these in class, so we'll make sure that we know them. Okay, so let's complete these using le passé composé ou l'imparfait. I recommend that you pause these questions and then try to put them in and quiz yourself. Work on this and see how you do with each answer instead of just going through and watching this. So here we go. Here's the first one. Okay, let's look first at some of our keywords. Okay, that's a time when this happened. Okay, so this is last summer. We're going to use the passé composé. Okay, let's look at the next one. You know, a word like jeune means young. Okay, and words like souvent. And there you go. You would use the imparfait in situations where we have them in talking about how young they were and what they would do often. Okay, a word like this, d'habitude, means usually. Okay, by habit, or usually, is what that means. Now look at this. Ce matin is this morning. So this is one sentence. You will have both the imparfait and the passé composé. Do you see why? Usually their brother would do this, but this morning he did this. So we are going to use them both very often. Let's look at this example, and this is our last one that we'll look at for today. And this is, okay, so something about in the sand when Anne said to him to go back home. All right, so let's see if we can pick this up. And there you go. We're going to have both. So I want to see in your notes when we get to class that you've done the timeline and that you were able to answer these questions. And we'll go over this and do some additional work to practice raconter une histoire au passé. We're going to be working in groups soon, and we're going to be writing a story about something that we did in the past. And you're going to be using both of these tenses. So that's it for now. Merci classe. À bientôt.